Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Advanced Training for the PDN.net. My name is Alan Cooper, and I'm one of the vendors actually supporting the PDN.net program as it relates to actually entering the data as well as the reporting aspect. Kind of the main objectives of today's advanced session is really to kind of help get the hospital users to be able to use their data in a better way through one or two tools, either through getting the data out of Data through the Pentaho tool and use it your Excel on your laptop, or leverage the Pentaho Saiku tool that actually allows you to do things online. So the goal here is hopefully by the end of this you'll feel a little bit more comfortable with one or both of the methods that kind of fit your needs. And I'll attempt to explain each of these as we go through them. And there should be time at the end for questions related to these areas. And we may in between the two have like a 5-minute or less open questions based on the topic, if that makes sense. So the agenda here is to kind of discuss the ways to get the data out. So we'll talk through that. Kind of review how to extract the data out of PDN. What are your options in doing so? Some examples of leveraging Excel to do what you need to do to look at your data. And then we'll also get into the online tool called Saiku and talk a little bit about how to use that tool and why you would. So the first thing we'll do is talk a little bit about the methods of getting your data out. You know, as I stated, you have one method of actually just getting the raw data through a CSV or Excel report out of Pentaho itself. And this is probably the most flexible way of accessing your data because it'll be at the most granular level of the actual birth themselves. And this will also allow you to do many things with the data at your as it makes sense for you. And this can be accessed through where you would find all the reports underneath the standard reports directory within Pentaho. There is currently a predefined set of fields that are available. We have almost up to 500 fields, and then you'll be able to use Microsoft Excel to actually view and use this data. The other method of accessing the same data is through the tool called Saiku Analytics. And in my opinion, you know, the purpose of using that tool is to be able to answer quick and specific questions, and in a very quick way without actually having to download anything, and be able to do these summaries of information and then drill down into those summaries to actually patient-level data. And this kind of leverages what we call a predefined cube, and essentially that is just a preset of data that is the same data that's for the detail extract, but it's kind of formed in a different way called a cube. From an end user's perspective, you know, there really is no difference in the information. And then you do have the opportunity to, you know, export that data once you actually work your reports in Saiku into a CSV file. So at the end of the day, you are able to get to what you want to get. We'll just talk through a little bit of which way you should go based on your needs. So how to use detailed data extract. So there are two options that you can do to get the data out from the data extract perspective. We have two reports. One is called Detailed Data Extract, and that is just the full 500 columns roughly at the moment. And our goal is to get the remaining fields that are in data that you're entering in by the end of February. And then there's also a condensed version of that same that is really focused on 100 and some fields or columns that we believe are the more useful ones, and for those that find the 500 column plus report overwhelming, it's recommended that you kind of start with the condensed version to kind of get comfortable with what the data is. And in terms of actually getting the data out, initially when we opened up the detailed data extract, it was targeted only as an Excel download. And we've actually expanded that to allow for CSV download, and I'll talk a little bit about why in a second. But there are two ways of getting that data out of there. So if we focus more on the Excel, the original report, this one does have some overhead of getting the data out, and there are some limitations of the number of rows before that actually kind of runs out of memory. And kind of this was the initial report, and we are tempted in probably the first quarter of this year, maybe second quarter of this year, of expiring this report, but some people just feel better at knowing that it's an Excel file versus a CSV file. Typically, Excel recognizes that right away as the application. So for the moment, we're going to keep this report alive. But the limitations that I express here is probably the reasons why it may go away. And thus why we kind of created a different way of getting the data out through the CSV. And now that's this common delimited file that it's a lot faster than Excel in terms of downloading it. At the moment, we have not found a limit in the number of rows to extract. And at the end of the day, it looks exactly the same as the Excel in terms of the columns and etc. So our recommendation is those that are actually going to leverage the detailed extract, they should use the CSV version for the reasons stated above. Now, where to find those extracts? As I stated before, you log into Pentaho and through the Perry data system, and once you log in, you can go to the Browse Files area and go to the Standard Reports directory and get into the Detail Extract directory, and then you will find the four data extract reports available. And we attempted to label them appropriately so you know the comprehensive one is the main one, and you have those two versions, CSV and Excel, as well as you have the condensed version, as stated before, a little bit more focused. And this is just an example of what it looks like. We just kind of took a screenshot of the right or the leftmost portion of the reports and kind of display the left or the right portion to how many columns there are. So it's very, there's really no formatting. It's just really about the data at this point.
Now, Alan,
yes.
This is Lisa. There is a question. Can you just describe a little bit more about a CSV file? The question came up as to, is there anything special about a program that runs it or anything?
Yeah, good question. So CSV file can be opened up in two programs mainly. You can use what they call a text editor or a notepad to open it, which most people do not, other than maybe data people like myself. But mainly, you can just open it up in Excel. And Excel recognizes CSV as a format. So when you open it up, it knows how to handle it and place the columns appropriately. The difference really at the end of the day is Excel file type versus a CSV file type. Excel just has formatting and overhead that if anyone that has ever worked with Excel before, you can format columns and rearrange things, colors and fonts, and you can do, you can have multiple tabs right in Excel. In a CSV file, there's only one tab. It's a flat file, and there's no formatting on it at all.
Okay, thank you, Alan. This is Lisa, and again, I'm a complete putz with this stuff, and I have found it pretty easy to work with, and I think when Alan shows a demonstration in a little bit, we're going to see it pretty clearly.
So two ways to use the data. One is which is the pivot table, and basically this is an opportunity for you to take the detailed extract and basically use it to kind of summarize information depending on what you're looking for. But it's a really good way of doing counts or some summation or averages, any of those statistical type of things. You're able to do that and also be able to do what they call crosstab, which I think many of you may be familiar with Oracle previously. But yeah, that just allows you to summarize things and create a report on it. The other method is Excel formulas, and essentially the whole point of that is to be able to take, whether it's 100 and some columns or 500 columns of fields of information, but all you care about is a subset of it, of maybe like 40 or so. You can use Excel formulas and kind of create a template, if you will, or a tab that can reference the main data, and we'll walk through this, but essentially you can refresh your data as much as you want, but still keep the format of these 40 columns. So we'll go into that shortly. So the pivot tables. So basically, it looks like this, and what you do is to get to this format, you just click up on the there's like an insert area, and I'll walk through this. You click on the insert tab of Excel, and then it says a pivot table. You click on the pivot table, and it tells you where to go, and in terms of the new tab, and then once you click new tab, this is what you see. It kind of just lays out the fields to the right that you can choose from to actually have in your pivot table, whether you want them to be in the rows or columns, and then what do you actually want to count or summate, and that's where the values are. You also have the ability to report on, your ability to actually filter on it at a report level, and we'll go through a little bit of that as well. But this is what it looks like. So an example that I have is, attendance for each OB PCP. So, what I selected here from my fields, from my detail extract, was I wanted to say, give me all my attendance, and that's what you'll see as like Joseph Doctor or Johnson or John Johnson, etc. And then I want to see who are the primary OBs related to that. And then that's what you'll see as a sub-level within the attendant. And then I want to know, how many deliveries were there for these particular attendants and OB as they relate. And then you're able to do very quickly the counts of this information. Another example would be NICU admit by route of delivery. And this will kind of show, again, you kind of put your final route of delivery as kind of your row of information, and then you kind of put in your column head of were they admitted to NICU or not, and then those that say yes are the ones that you see the count for, and then you can see how many that were not. And then some with NA means that they were not, it was not specified whether they were not. So that would be another example that you could use. Now the one thing, let's see here, I think that got placed in the wrong spot. Okay, so one thing I want to also highlight is the notion of refreshing your data when you establish a pivot table. So the goal is for the pivot tables is if you have some regular, whether it's weekly or monthly reports you have to kind of submit to someone requesting them, not to recreate your pivot tables every single time. The intent would be is to update your information so that with new data from Peridata, and then basically update or refresh your pivot tables. And this is just highlighting the fact that if you want, after you update your data to detailed data, all you have to do is click on that refresh button on the top there, and then your numbers would change based on the new information. So that's what this is highlighting. Saving your pivot tables file. Now, the first time you ever do it, you may start with an Excel spreadsheet if you do the Excel version of the detail extract, or if you start with the CSV version. In either case, once you get that data down the first time, you should save it as an Excel spreadsheet. So whether as the type of XLS or XLSX, and all those two differences mean is, I think above Excel 2010 and above uses a different file type, and things below it uses an older version. But either way, you need to make sure it's created as a spreadsheet. And once you do that, then when you create your tab for your pivot table, then it will be saved. As I mentioned before, if you bring down a CSV file version and you create your pivot table, what happens is if you ever save it again as a CSV, depending on which tab you are on, it will only save that tab. So you essentially could lose that pivot table you created, or you could lose the detail extract. Either way, you're losing a piece of the information that is required to be able to do what you need to do. So for updating your data, as I think I mentioned this before, let's see here. You go and download your data, and you kind of have that file available, okay? And then if for something you've already created, you would open up that Excel spreadsheet. And then all you would have to do is copy the information from the data extract that you brought down and then paste it into your tab where you have your old data extract, and you're basically overlaying that information. And then you would just click on the refresh button, and then your pivot tables will be up to date based on the new information. And then it's probably recommended that you save right away the Excel spreadsheet with the pivot table, and then you can probably discard the CSV you brought down from Pentaho, because you won't really need that anymore. So detail, is there any questions? Should we put a stop on this? Or I suspect there probably is a lot of questions, and I think what I could do in the demo portion is kind of show some of those things a little bit better. But is there any other questions that I can answer now that is useful?
Alan, right now I'm not seeing any questions.
Okay.
I'm not seeing any either, Alan.
Okay, great. Well, I will get into the formula side of the detailed data extract. So at the end of the day, as I stated before, all you're doing is creating another tab. And once you bring down this, the CSV report, detail extract report, that allows you to kind of isolate the columns that you care about. And you use this Excel cell formula reference as the ability to actually pull the information over into your new tab. And this is just highlighting the fact that it's a very simple, straight formula that's just referencing the detail extract tab. So I have an example that I wanted to walk through. We call it the depths report, and hopefully this will help. And I kind of made it step by step to help kind of guide us through this. The first step is just really just once you download the Excel or the CSV report, excuse me, for the detail extract, is to create a new tab. And that will allow you to actually begin to store your, what we call your template for the columns you care about. In this particular depth report, we have roughly 20 or so columns that we care about. So the second step would be is to actually create the column headers that you want them to be. And in this case, as you see, I have birth record owner, count by birth, mother's last name, etc. And then right below the column headers that I just created, I have what I call as reference column names that would be in the detailed extract. So if you look at count by births, I have a reference point of KB, mother's last name, I have E, and these are the actual columns that are actually in my detailed extracts. And the reason I do this is merely to help with the next step of creating the formula, so I don't have to go back and forth when I create formulas. This helps me real quickly understand where the information resides within the detailed extract. Excuse me. So the third step is actually create the formula once you have that information. So what you do is assuming you do not change the name of the detailed extract tab, you literally in that particular cell you type in single quote detail space extract single quote explanation point, and then you update, or then you put in A that references the A column, and then you basically look at what I referenced here for birth record owner. I say that in the detail extract, that's the A column. So that's what I'm going to put here. And then for this particular section, I know that my first starting point on detail extract is actually row 2. So I will type that in, and then you just hit enter, and then you'll just see that that's the actual formula used to get that data. The fourth step is to copy that formula all the way across to all your columns. So I did that as an example, and you'll see that all the information there technically doesn't make sense, because all it's doing is taking my formula that had column A and then copying it and making, B column, etc., etc. So what you have to do at that point is, once you're done copying over, you have to actually update the column reference letter. So you'll notice in my count by birth, initially it probably was detail extract explanation point B2. Well, I just updated the formula to say KB instead, because that's what I'm saying that the count, column is in the detail extract. And then once I hit enter, then it updates to 1. So you do that exact same thing for each of those columns by really just updating the reference to, the next one would be E, the next one would be D, etc., all the way up to the last one with peridata.net ID would be B. So you'll notice if I go backwards or if I go forwards, that things will align better. So once I have applied that notion, you'll notice that the first row, last name, the medical record, infant last name, all that stuff looks like what it should look like compared to before I did that. Not all the fields actually look like they make sense. And then basically the next step is you highlight the row you just created with your formulas and you update it with the new reference IDs. You copy it, and you can use Control-C to do that, or right-click it and click copy. And then you just kind of span it down. And I just recommend, depending on the size of your hospital, go to 1,000 rows. Maybe you only need 500 rows. It really depends on the size. And copy that all the way down. And then once you do that, you'll notice in this particular example, I only had, 15 or so true data that brought down my extract. So I have a bunch of zeros below it. And all that means is that I don't have any information in the detail extract beyond that point. So there's just referencing zeros. So you can, the next step would be, which is optional, is you can just highlight that area and just delete those. Delete those rows so you don't have that extra information. I say it's optional because I personally would not do that, mainly because I want to reuse this report, and then if I delete it, then I'd have to go and paste that stuff again. The intent here is that you have this report in place, so then next time you update your detail extract, you don't have to do anything on this tab. You can leave it as it is, and it will function what you want. But if you, for whatever reason, you need to send this to someone and you want to get the zeros out, you can do so, and just be, what I do is save it then as a different file so you can keep the template the way it is. And then I just reference the last piece is, to refresh your data. And this is the same for when you do it for pivot tables. You basically click on the right-hand corner of the Excel, or the left-hand corner of the Excel on that by the A and the 1. And that highlights the whole sheet. And you do that for the detail extract that you're bringing down, the new information, and you can hit Control-C to copy it, and then you go into your template spreadsheet, I call it, where you're going to have a few tabs that have different information in columns, and then you just paste it into that, basically your detailed data tab, and then you'll have your updated information. And in the demo, I'll just show you some other examples of different columns that would reference for this particular calculation formula version. Is there any questions on that we can talk about?
The two questions I see so far more have to do with getting copies of the slides. Anne, can you speak to that?
I can. We were planning to record the webinar and have it on the website, but if people just want the slides, can we make those available, Alan?
Absolutely. And we'll also put it out there in the help desk forum too.
Okay, so let's do the recorded webinar on the WAPC website and the slides on your website, on the Peridata website.
Sounds great. Yeah,
Thanks.
we'll convert this to a PDF so it's not as large for people. So
Great.
Perfect.
And then
Thanks.
the other subplot is while this is very helpful, it probably would be for some people a good idea for them to take an Excel class if they're not, if they feel that this is a little above their heads.
okay, yeah, that's and that's one thing that we're open for people to actually schedule time with us to help you too. One-on-one. I could probably teach an Excel class. So, for those that are very interested in learning more and how to really empower themselves to know Excel, and they want to learn, feel free to schedule a time with our support desk with me, and we can take a half an hour or an hour to get you up to speed where you feel comfortable.
One of the things that I see is that I think that question came from somebody who referred to herself or himself as a basic report technician. Do you think that this is intended more for people who are using the data and analyzing the data as opposed to people who are entering the data?
Yes. It's, I mean, those entering the data, I think the use of that would mainly be as getting a report out of the system to make sure you didn't miss anything.
Okay.
Well, this is Lisa. The other subplot to this, though, is I would see sort of three levels. There's certainly data entry people who might have nothing to do with reports. There's a level of who's getting reports out, and some of the people that I'd call users might not even be in here at all. They just want to tell somebody, here's the stuff I need, go get it for me, if that makes sense. So some of your end-to-end users probably aren't going to be in here at all. They're going to rely on someone else to develop these types of files and so on and get them out for them. And that's why we're on the call here, because we're probably the type of folks who would get the stuff out.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks.
Now, this other little topic here, how do I reuse my templates from Excel data extract to CSV data extract? So essentially, those users that have been downloading the detail extract via the Excel spreadsheet, and then they have created their kind of formula-based templates, as we just described. There is kind of a translation, if you will, that happens with the CSV if you go down that route that I wanted to just try to help people navigate to. So essentially, one of the examples Lisa brought to my attention when she was using it is she was using an Excel spreadsheet, create her templates, and some of the templates had dates. And Excel, as the report bring it down, handles the dates as a date. It's a date. With the CSV, if you don't specify a date column as being a date type, it translates it to a general type of column, which in some cases converts a date that you see it into a 6-digit number. So those that are going to go down the path of converting from Excel to CSV in terms of bringing down the detail extract, this is you should pay attention to this. And now I would suggest that definitely reach out to us if you want help doing this, because I don't want you to lose anything that you may have. But I just wanted to give everyone a flavor of it's really not very hard to deal with if you just kind of do a few simple steps. So I call this like convert the template to accept CSV, and basically, as you know, if you're going to overlay your data, so let's just if you visualize this, if you have your template already in place, and you have your detail extract data tab already there that came from Excel, the next thing you do is you bring down a new copy of the data, but you want to leverage the CSV version because it's faster and etc. Before you do a copy and a paste of the information as I displayed before, there is an area or a function for calculation on a spreadsheet that you have the ability, and then the default is automatic, but to make it manual, of which if you turn that to manual, so basically you want to turn off the auto calculation and then do your copy paste exercise to your data extract, and then saved the information, it will then not try to force the information to convert from basically a date to this general number. Now there are alternatives that I can go with, but this is the most simplest thing to do. And in fact, Lisa, I wish we did this for you. I didn't think of it when we helped kind of convert your information. But essentially, if you don't have it calculate, it won't try to convert it. And then once you're done, then you just turn back on the auto calculation, and then all your data should be fine.
So Alan, can you say quickly where that calculation thing is up on the
it's going to be in your main header, and I'll show it to you guys when I'm doing an example. But it should be in your main bar. I think it's your home bar of your Excel. And it'll just be up in the right hand or near the right hand corner. Actually, looking at this now, it actually might be in our options. I will show that to make sure everyone sees where it's at. But again, if you don't feel comfortable doing this on your own, you want to work with us for a few minutes, again, request that through our support desk, and we can help you get through that. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is jump off of this and go into kind of some of the things that we talked about and show you a little bit of the pivot table stuff. And then this is where, definitely ask your questions so that you can see what I'm doing, and if you have questions there, I can answer them right away. So let's see here. So one of the things what I'll do is go into, we have a pivots table example. So I can, as an example, I can create a new pivot table. So the assumption here is I bring down the data and this is my detail extract. Okay, this is what the detail data is. And what I want to do is create a new pivot table. Okay, so this is kind of the end product. So what I'll do is mimic that with the detail extract that I have over here. So the first thing that you do is I start by highlighting the whole area by clicking on this corner right here. You'll notice if I literally just click between the A and the 1 up in the left-hand corner, it highlights everything. And then the next thing I do is go to the pivot table area, and that's typically underneath the Insert tab of Excel, and you click on Pivot Table. And then it's going to ask you for the selected table or range, and I've already done that, so it's going to basically pre-populate that information based on what I've already highlighted. And then what I'm going to also do is create a new worksheet. So basically, when you click on the pivot table, it's going to take you exactly, everything's going to be populated as you expect it, and you don't really have to change anything. You just essentially just hit OK. And now it's going to go and create that little pivot table area. And to activate the stuff related to the columns and the headers and stuff like that, you literally just have to click on the pivot table. And then you will see that these are the fields available. You also have the opportunity to sort these in a manner that makes more sense to you. We have right now the data extract sorted in a way that kind of aligns a little bit, and not in every case, but for the most part, as to how you enter the information into Peridata. I find it easier actually to go into Tools here, this little widget thing, and do a sort by A through Z. So then everything is sorted in alphanumeric order. And then, so if I want to emulate what's already been done for NICU admin, is I would find the final route for the row. Oh, I think I missed it. And then I would just drag that, so click on it and drag it and put it into the rows. And then the next thing that I have here is NICU admission. That's my column. So then I would find that in my list. And then I want to count the number of births. So that should be Peridata, I think. That's the Peridata net ID, so that's the most granular one. I'm going to do a count, and all I'm doing is dragging these things in the areas. And by default, it always defaults to count. You can do other things if it makes sense to you by changing it to summation, averages, min-max, other types of statistical functions. But the default is count. So if you look at this and you compare what I have here, obviously different data, but it looks the same.
And this is Lisa. Oftentimes, too, you'd probably want to make sure you had some kind of a date in there, unless you had already grabbed that differently on your other drag down. But usually you put some kind of date in there. The other comment I'll make is here's for the OBPCP. We did have to add that column on distinct deliveries. So if you want it counting correctly, you want to make sure you find distinct delivery.
Yeah, and I'll highlight that one. That's the slide that I got rearranged in the wrong order. Thanks for bringing that up. That does make, yeah. So basically, Excel, older version of Excel does not count information distinctively. newer versions of Excel, I think 2013 above, you do have the ability to do that. Now, because we don't know who has what version, we created a new column called distinct delivery. And basically, and I'll go back to the, I could probably go back to the PowerPoint on that one before I forget, to talk a little bit about that. So this is kind of what Lisa was referencing. There's a column called distinct delivery, and essentially what that does is, if there is more than one birth per delivery, what it's going to do here is our report for the detailed extract recognizes that that's the case for these particular two records, and it's not going to populate that particular cell with the delivery ID again, because older versions would count that one again. So then basically your delivery counts would not be right. They would really be birth counts. So this is our kind of workaround to do distinct counts at the delivery level. So the other thing I wanted to show you is when you kind of have more than one level of information. So the attendance for each OB PCP, and then show you how you can do filters. So what I'll do is grab the attendant in primary care, and then I'll do the same thing again. So I'm going to go back to my detail extract, and it's by default, if you've highlighted the first time and you didn't de-highlight it, it'll stay highlighted for next time. So you can go to that corner, click on there, it'll highlight everything, go into Insert, click on Pivot Tables. You don't have to touch anything here. Click OK, and then it'll create a new pivot table for you. And then we want to grab attendant. And then we want to do primary OB. And you drag that, and you drag it underneath it. And then of counted deliveries, okay. And then let's see, that's distinct here. It doesn't look like I have one for this one, so I'm just going to take delivery ID and put it. So if you're not going to have, if you literally are going to count the actual column that actually has the granular data, whether it's the paired data ID or the delivery or distinct delivery ID, you don't need to put that in the columns. You can put that right into the values themselves, and then by default the column name will just be the count of whatever you're attempting to count. Now you can rearrange these things really easy, where you can do primary first and see who were the attendants related to the primary. So it's very easy for you to drag information. If you don't want the primary anymore, you just want the attendant, you can just literally drag it out of there, put it back into the fields area, and then that'll be deleted. You can also just click on the little arrow button and just say remove field, and that'll be gone that way as well. I think we had a filter on there. Let's see, date of birth year. So we add a filter. You just drag it here, filters. You'll notice that it never got added to your actual columns, and because maybe you didn't want it there. You just want to be able to filter by year. So if you had more than 1 year per your data extract, then you can basically look at both of them or all of them and be able to slice and dice your data. So that's my examples of the pivot table, and then I'm going to quickly get into, because we're the reference stuff. So this was the example of the reference, and I'm going to kind of start with I'll delete these things right here. So the assumption here is that I put my columns in place. These are the columns that I care about. And I've also went in to determine where each of this information is. So as an example, counts by birth is in KV. KV, my detail extract. So I just go over to this spreadsheet and scroll until you see KV. And that's where this is right here. Number of fetus deliveries, KV. Now I'm not sure that makes sense in this particular case. So mother's last name is E. Let's see here. So here's the mother's last name, and then yeah, the infant's last name, just as a final example, that's an L, and that's where that is. So for this exercise to populate these, you basically have to look for the column you're looking for, and then just identify, well, which one of these columns does it represent, and then just put those letters in there. And then what you do next is you can just start typing and do equals, and then you do single quote, detail, extract, and then you do exclamation point, and then you just type in A, that's where your column is right here, 2, and then that's all you do. And then you copy that by doing Control-C on that value, or that cell, and then you just mouse over and highlight the area you want to paste, and you Control-V. So what's going to do is copy that formula, and then what you want to do here then is you're going to want to update that to be KV instead of B, and then you update this to E, and that's already D, and then this could be L, and etc. So you can do that, and then once you do the rest of these, then you just highlight this area, do Control-C copy, and then you just scroll down and highlight the area that you want to paste. And then you do Control-V, and then it's basically going to take that formula and apply it to the other rows. And then, like I stated before, you know, I usually would leave these in here personally, because if you update your data extract, you'll notice that these things will populate with the new information, because I'm assuming your data will grow. Is there any questions on that? Okay. I think I'm going to get back into the PowerPoint real quick here and talk a little bit about the SciQ.
Alan, right before you do that,
Yep.
The one thing is when it said detail extract, you do have to copy the name exactly as it appears. The example you're using says that, but depending how your file comes down, it might have a little different name.
That's a good point. I think if it does come down with a different name, reference that name. Sometimes you can update the tab name to be for something very basic. So like you can just double click on the actual tab name and call it detail. You can rename it. You can do a right click on that and also rename it, you know, details. You know, keep it basic, you know, if it doesn't come across as basic, because then it'll make your formula creation very simplistic. Thanks for that. Okay, so get back into this real quick. So the next thing that you could do that, again, this is, in my opinion, should be used mainly to answer specific questions or get some aggregate information in a very quick manner without having to step through it by downloading the data. Now granted, if you downloaded the data for the particular month and you have your pivot tables in place, you could do the same exact thing on your pivot tables and probably be just as quick as doing this. So this is basically just another alternative to that approach if this particular approach resonates better with you. So create your own reports. Again, it's a summary analytics, as I stated. It's about crosstabs and counts, and you are able to drill down into a particular data set summary to see who actually is in there as your patients. Start with some basic fields for the basic functionality. Typically, if you have more than one facility that you have access to, you can narrow down the facilities that make sense to you. Date range is typically fairly important too, because obviously you kind of want to know the range of your information. And then typically your counts is driven on your birth events or your peri-data ID. Sometimes you may do the deliveries. It really depends on what you're attempting to count. And then you are able to save that template and reuse it in the future. So as I stated before, sometimes you want to do these things more ad hoc or random. You may want to just keep this as your online pivot table, and you are able to save the template, if you will, of if you had a certain date range, facilities, and whatever fields you chose to kind of add to it. The only constraint this tool has is the ability to save the detail level portion of it in terms of referencing it back right away. You basically have to do a drill down to get that information again. So to get started, you log into peri-data, and then once there, you redirect to Pentaho. And then on the basically left-hand side, you have an area, and it's called Create New. You click on Create New. And within that, you will have a sub-menu called that you will click on Psycho Analytics. You can also reach that in there by clicking on the File, click New, and then Psycho Analytics is up there on the toolbar as well. Either way will get you to the same destination. So the next thing you will do is, if you've never done and you want to create a new query, you would click on, up in the right-hand corner, Create New Query. And from there, you will then be able to select the queue, I mentioned this before, of the information you actually want to use. So in our particular case, we have two cubes. We have one called Condensed Detail Cube that has less fields as this detail extract, and then you have the Detail Data Cube, which is the more comprehensive version. So either one will get you the same result if the information is the same. So once you select the cube, you will have then a list of what they call measures and dimensions. Basically, the measures is the core data that you're counting or summing up. And as I stated before, I would either focus on the birth events as your counts or summation of deliveries. And then you have your dimensions, and all that really means is that this is the information similar to pivot tables that you can carve out as, I want this to be the few pieces of information on the row, and then I want to have like 2 or 3 of these as column headers for my information. But these are the dimensions available, which should align to how you see it in peri-data when you enter in data. So as an example, if you want to kind of start, typically you probably want to do birth events. So you would actually go and click on birth events, and you literally, similar to pivot tables, drag it over into the measures area. Next thing you want to do is choose the appropriate dimension. So, in this case, we can do attendance and facility name. So as you can see here, you can drag it down into the rows area. Again, very similar to pivot tables. They're almost using the same nomenclature here. And then they also do hierarchies. So if the top portion of the row for the dimension would be the one that's farthest to the left. And then once you drag each of those pieces of information, and because you have the birth events already in the measures, it will automatically start counting the information for you. The other thing you can do is add to it by adding more specific stuff like mother's race and etc. You also can do it's very similar to the reporting for the pivot tables, where you can do filters on something and not have it be a part of the dimension. But you can also have a dimension be a filter two in a row. So if you just want to have a filter that's higher above, that's not part of your data set, you would just drag that dimension into the filter area. And then once you select on it, which I think we're running low on time on possibly showing the actual, I may be able to do it quickly, but you know, you have to actually select the right filter and then just click yes or okay to actually get it to actually work. And this is an example of that. So if you want to just filter on yes, you would have to click on the little arrow to bring it over there to include it, and then you click OK, and then the filter will be applied. And then if you don't want to include something, you to remove a filter, you just click on the other arrow. And the middle arrows, double arrows, are basically clear all or add them all type of things. And as I mentioned before, you know, once you get your summary information, you can do this thing called drill down. And that little arrow up right there allows you to actually drill through a cell. And what that means is you can highlight a count. So let's say hypothetically go back here. You can highlight, like for Joseph Doctor underneath Ancilla Test Hospital, and you can click on the 1. And once you click on that cell, and you click on that little thing that looks like an arrow pointing down, that allows you to drill down into that information and see who actually, what is the birth event that is being counted for this particular summary. And this is kind of how it shows. You click on that, and then you, once you click on that and you do a drill down, then you get to choose what information do you actually want to see related to that particular record. And then you select that, and then this would be the outcome. You'd be able to see that the fields that relate to those records that you selected. But once you click the X to get out of there, that basically your report is gone. But you can always do a drill down again on the main report to get that information. And real quick, for if you wanted to download the information, it's the same exact. It's just right next to it on the right, and that is basically pointing to, instead of creating a pop-up box of it, you can actually do a CSV download of that same information, and so you can actually use it. You go through the same mechanism, and once you get the download, then you just make sure you save it as an Excel worksheet or a workbook so you can open it again as an Excel, especially if you use other tabs. You don't want to lose those tabs. And then if you want to actually save your query or your template, make sure you hit save, and then that will be able to save that for you to go back in a future time to actually not have to recreate that template again. These are just some information related to how you should actually save it. You can save it in your personal folder or a system folder, depending if you want to have others use your template, or if you just want to kind of keep that template to yourself. And this just kind of shows the example here. And then if you want to access it again, to open up what you did save, is you would just click on the open query and then go find that particular template that you saved, and then just open it up, and then you can go on your way. And then you have to just make sure, if you want to edit that query instead of just running it, you just click on the little pencil up above on the menu bar to be able to edit it. I think we're probably out of time to actually go through these examples, so I think I'd rather get into questions if there are some.
There is one question, Alan, and now let me pull it up. The person said that they were in Saiku while you were describing it, but they weren't able to drag the dimensions.
But then they said they were able to after they opened the subcategories, so I think that's...
Oh, I see, and never mind.
Well, I'm glad that they pointed that out because that could be confusing. So let me just quickly go back to an area where you can see that. So I think well, let me go and do a different one here. So these are the top of the dimensions. You have to actually click on that little arrow to the right to actually get to the fields themselves. So this is an example of that. So you click on, like if you wanted to get to the mother race or the state or the facility name, you got to open up the main directory dimension and then drag over the fields that are within that subdirectory, if you will.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I don't see any. Do you, Lisa?
Well, again, just to wrap up, the recording of this webinar will be posted onto the WAPC site. The slides, Alan is going to convert that to a PDF, and that will be available on the help section within the Perry Data application. Is that correct?
That's correct. And we will reference in that in Perry Data so people know where to look.
Excellent. The thing that, as co-chair of the data committee, the one thing that I would also ask for or suggest is we do plan to have periodic advanced seminars as well as more frequent, very basic things. But within that, we would appreciate any kind of feedback you have as to what types of questions do you have, what do you want to learn about. Maybe you work with this a little bit and some more things come up, but that will help us very much in planning future sessions because we want to make these as useful and meaningful for all of our end users.
And just as a reminder, on February 10th at noon, we'll be having a basic data entry training through with Alan. So that'll be the 10th at noon. And we'll let you know when the others are scheduled, and we would appreciate your input as to the content of those.
And definitely, if you have questions, do not hesitate to contact us through, whether it's the email or the phone number. And if you need to set time up on some of these, don't hesitate. We are here to help you guys get your information. And then I guess those that are interested in SciCool and want to have maybe a one-on-one session, definitely request that through the support as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Lisa. And until February 10th, enjoy.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.